There are moments when life as you know it completely falls apart. Divorce, loss, failure, heartbreak, financial collapse. It's 2 a.m., you can't sleep, and everything feels like it's over. But here's the truth. This is not the end. I'm Christy Zlakis, and this is a show where we talk about the strategies that turn heartbreak, loss, and failure into success, and share the real stories of people who've done it. Because no matter how dark it feels right now, your story isn't over. Hello and welcome back to This Is Not the End. Today we are here with my good friend, Angela Jackson. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
So I have known Angela for many, many years. Angela is a business owner here in the DC area. And Angela does a lot of amazing things, like she helps rescue cats from Honduras. Angela, why don't you tell our guests a little bit about yourself and about the life that you live today?
I am a personal trainer. I've been a personal trainer for about 16, 17 years. And I am also trying to start a second business, which is crazy as it sounds, a candle business, totally out in left field, completely different from what I'm doing now. And um, I am super passionate about animals. So I got involved about 2 years ago in rescuing cats. Never considered myself a cat person until we stumbled across a cat in Honduras that we fell madly in love with. And then we discovered the plight of the Honduran cat. And so now I help for the rescue in Honduras that rescues cats, and brings them here to the United States and finds them homes and rescues to put them in here in the US. And dogs as well. But
Oh, yeah. You can't forget all the different four-legged creatures. And one of the fun things about Angela is she is just as crazy as I am. I have said, I believe, on this podcast before that I have 5 animals. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. And Angela also has 5 animals, but she has it reversed. She has 3 cats and 2 dogs.
2 dogs, right. And 2 kids. So
And 2 kids. So Angela, it really sounds like you have so much going on for you, and I know that you have so much going on for you now. You got one really established business. You have another business that you are starting, and your candles smell so incredibly good. I have them at my house.
yeah.
But you asked me to come on this podcast because there were certain things that you wanted to say, and I first really appreciate it. But I know that not everything has always been so good and so easy for you.
Right. So I think the thing is when I heard you talk about this new beginnings thing, I thought, as you know my history, but not everybody does, I thought like, wow, what a great way to get my story out. And if somebody can hear it and it hopefully helps them, that would be fantastic. And I kind of have a two-part story about, new beginnings. And a little bit of my background is that I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley, and grew up not without a lot. We were fairly poor, but I had a very, very, very dysfunctional family. My father was an alcoholic, and he also was a pedophile. And so I was one of his victims of many, and I just wanted to tell my story so that people could hear it and, hear what things I use to help kind of move me forward. And also, I wanted to tell the story, like all of it, so that they can know that, like, it's not always like you get a new beginning and everything's great. You get out of something, everything's great. You have stumbles along the way, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And thank you for being so vulnerable. So I kind of want to take you back to the breaking point and kind of when it all came apart. So you've already mentioned and told us your father was an alcoholic and a pedophile, and I cannot even imagine how horrifying it must be to grow up like that. But what was the moment for you when you really had to confront that and make a different change to change the trajectory for yourself?
So for me, I was raised with the understanding because, people like that brainwash you and they make you think things that aren't necessarily true. But I was raised being told my whole life that if I told as a child, I would be taken out of the home. I would never see my parents again. I would never see my brothers again. I would be put in foster care. So like that kept me, and also there was so much shame attached to it that it kept me silent my entire childhood. And even at one point, my father was under investigation criminally for this for this against a family member. And even during the criminal investigation, when social services was investigating us, the fear of being taken away from my family and the things that he was telling me kept me quiet. But then once I got older, I realized that like I had to tell the truth. I had to say something and kind of confront him and tell my family and deal with this trauma um to make myself be a functional adult
Well, I was
because
gonna ask you, why did you have to do that? Like, what you said you realized that, but why? Why did you have to do that? Why was that so important to your healing?
I didn't want to live a lie. And every time that I would interact with my family, I always felt like I was living in this lie. I mean, and I knew that at some point in my life, I wanted to have my own family. And I always knew that I wanted to be a mother. And so, what was I going to do when I had children? Right? Was I going to take my kids to grandma and grandpa's house and
Yeah.
pretend like everything was okay? And I think the thing is that I knew I had to say something. I knew I had to tell, and I knew I had and, like, the biggest fear for me was if I told, then what was gonna happen? No one would believe me, and I would lose my entire family, and that was pounded into me my entire life, and so when I did finally confront my father and tell my family, and my father, of course, denied it, and my mother said that it wasn't true, even though I 150% know that my mother knew exactly what was going on. And everything that he said my entire life was going to happen did happen. I lost my family because it got to a point. It basically was I had to choose my family over. I either had to accept the truth or have a family. And so for me, my thing was my truth. I knew exactly what the truth was. And so they told me I was lying. My father told me it wasn't true. And I lost my family. Like, they haven't talked to me since.
So, how old were you when you decided that you needed to confront them and tell them the truth?
I was I think I was
Yes.
23, 24 years old,
And
and
what were you doing at that time?
I finished college. I had done a lot of therapy, um, to get me to that point, and I actually remember the first thing that I ever did was I did a group therapy for incest survivors because I always thought that I was the only like I always felt like I was the only person that had gone through this, right? There's that level of shame that you can't tell other people. And now what I know is that there's so many people in this world that have experienced something so similar or worse than what I experienced. But the group therapy that I did helped me see that I wasn't alone. And I wasn't the only person that had gone through this. And I wasn't the only person walking around with this shame. And as a matter of fact, and I understand that everything's all relative, there were women out there and men who experienced far worse than anything I ever experienced. So the group therapy, and then the individual therapy helped me get to a point where I could confront this and do what I felt was right, like for myself and my mental health.
So, who was the first person in your family that you told?
My brother.
And how did that go?
Initially, it went well. He believed me at first. And I know that deep down he still believes me. But he told me when I first told him that he supported me and he believed me and he would do whatever I needed to, heal or move forward with this. But then what happened was I think that once I actually I think the whole time he thought that I was just going to carry this around and pretend like everything was great because that's so much easier for everybody.
Hmm. Of course.
And when it finally came time to do it and he actually realized for real that I was going to do this, all of a sudden he changed his mind. And even though he was the one that kind of like helped arrange the quote unquote family meeting, once he was put in that spot, just like my mother, he and said that he didn't believe me. He used God as a reason to not believe me, but
Okay. So let's that night. I know there was a specific night and you and I talked about it where you went to confront your father and confront your family and to tell them what happened to you. Who was there? When was that? And what was that night like for you?
it was my two brothers and my middle brother's wife, and then my mom and dad. It was actually, I remember this so clearly. It was a Saturday at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I drove to my parents' house. My college was only about 30 minutes away. I had actually just graduated college, but I was still living in my college town. And I drove to my parents' house, and I remember just being so sick because I was so scared, right? I walked into the house and everybody was there. And I knew the second that I walked in that shit wasn't right. Excuse my language. Like I knew because I could tell, I just had this feeling and I could tell by the way kind of everybody was acting
Yeah.
that things weren't, you know, it's okay, that things weren't going to go the way that I planned. And before I could even talk, before I could even get anything out, my mother kind of immediately started to say, you know, I I remember I know what you're getting ready to say, and I want you to know that nothing ever happened. And so that's when I said, you know, this is what happened to me. I said to my father, this is what you did until I was a teenager. And I remember it. And it's like literally like the earliest memory I have is of you doing things. And I begged him, you know, just admit it because in my head and as a child, even an adult child, we just want a relationship with our parents, right? And we just want everything to be okay. So my ultimate goal when I confronted him was in my brain. I thought, well, if I confront him and he admits it, then we can go to therapy or we can go to counseling and he can get quote unquote healed and we can all be a family. But of course, that's not how it works as a pedophile because I don't think they can be fixed. And he denied it. And he said that I never did anything to you. I never, you know, I don't, these are memories you created. My mother said I was always a liar. Those are the things that she said to me. You were always sneaking, is what she called me. You were sneaky, and you always made things up. Um, and my oldest brother, I remember he didn't really say anything. He just kind of was there. And my middle brother, who was the one who said he believed me, I said to him, just tell them the truth. Like tell them that you believe me. Tell them the truth. And that's when he said, I don't believe you. And his thing was, as crazy as it is that he said, "The reason I don't believe you is because I prayed and God told me the answer was no."
What was the immediate impact of that meeting on you?
Complete and utter devastation. That's the only way. It was a death.
Do you have a relationship with your family today?
No. I have some cousins that I talk to, but the ultimately, I remember calling I did actually call my brother a day or so later, and he still wouldn't believe me. And for me, the thing is that, um I couldn't have a relationship with them. I actually did try to have a relationship with my mother after my daughter was born. And, you know, I had these rules because she wanted to see my children. And I had these rules that my father couldn't be, if I went to visit, he couldn't be on the property. He could never be around my children, you know, all of these ground rules. But the issue was that the whole time that I was around her, and visiting with her, she would talk about my father like he was this great man, right? And she would pretend like everything was okay. And so it felt so fake to me. And it still felt like I was the one that was compromising my truth. Does that make sense?
It makes total
So
sense.
I would go there and visit with my kids, and she would give my kids gifts, and ev but the whole time I'm in the back of my head, I'm thinking, "She doesn't believe me. She thinks this woman's telling me I'm a liar over something, like, so horrible," and I couldn't I actually couldn't continue the relationship. I had to break the relationship off for my own well-being.
So I want to take you back to that breaking point. You had that confrontation with your family. You tried to reach out to your brother a couple days later, and then for a long time, it sounds like there was just nothing. And was that your breaking point?
Yeah, I mean, like, as far as my family goes, I mean, I think the thing is that I felt as if initially I felt as if maybe I was crazy, right? Because these people are telling me these are people that I lived my whole life with, and you have to. How do you grapple with the fact that you have a parent who showed you good things, right? But then also a parent who did these horrible things to you, and you have these siblings who you have memories with and you did great things with, but now they're telling you that you created these memories in your head. And maybe you're not such a bad person. We're not necessarily quote unquote saying you're lying, but maybe you just made this stuff up because you're not right in the head, you know? And so I actually thought for a while, maybe I am crazy. Maybe I did make this stuff up.
And how did that affect your identity or even how you saw yourself?
I struggled with it. I really, really struggled with it because fortunately, I think the thing that helped me, I think I would have been a lot worse off if I wouldn't have had family members who he did this to. So I was actually able to reach out to them, and they said to me, you're not making any of this stuff up in your head. You didn't dream this one night and then make it a reality. Like, this is stuff that he did to us as well. So that helped me a lot, but I definitely went through a period in college, or after this all happened, where I wasn't such a kind person to myself. And, I definitely drank too much. I kind of abused my body in ways that I shouldn't have abused it. Um, I was in a really bad place, and I was seeking a replacement family. I was just looking for somebody else to, like, to give me that love that I needed because I didn't love myself and I felt that no one else loved me either. I lost the thing that I was the closest to me, which was my family.
How did you begin to turn it around?
Well, therapy. And then also, I think one of the greatest gifts, I got to give him credit where credit's due. One of the greatest gifts that my father ever gave me was the gift of reading. So, sorry,
It's okay.
as my daughter says, I'm always an ugly crier, but he loved to read. And I got that gift, like, he gave me that gift, and so I read so much, and, one of the people that I loved to read, and I had actually discovered it in college, and, like, in college, it's what kind or not college, high school. I discovered her in high school, and it's what gave me the strength to, like, get an education, to speak out, was Maya Angelou. I read so much stuff, right? I read everything I could read, and I remember reading her book, and in her book, she had been raped, I think, by an uncle, and she had stopped talking for years, and, she was being raised by her grandmother, and everybody was like, "Why won't she talk? Why won't she talk?" And sorry, her grandmother one day said, "When she's ready to talk, she'll talk." And when I read that, I related to it, and so I kind of kept that in my head, and I read everything I could by her. And that's kind of the way that I look at it is like I don't know what it was, but one day I was ready to talk.
Was there a moment that you decided this is not the end and I'm going to pick myself up, stop abusing alcohol, stop abusing my body, and live the life that you wanted to live after, you had hoped that the confrontation would cause you to be able to have children and be the mother you want to be and live in your truth. But was there a moment that you picked yourself up and said, I'm going to choose something different for myself?
Yeah. Um, I don't, I, qu- as crazy as it is, I was in college and, in a grad school class, and, I was taking a psych class, and they gave us a book. It called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I read that and I thought to myself, like, I mean, I love life, right? Like I always have loved life. And so for me, that was kind of my clicking point was like reading this book about this guy who survived the concentration camp simply because he had one thing, which was something to look forward to, which was the love of his wife, who he actually, I think she passed, but, and his manuscripts. And I remember reading that and I actually wrote a paper on that book to my psych professor who then was like, thank you for sharing this with me, but maybe you should get some therapy, which I told him later I was in therapy. But that was kind of the clicking point where I was like, I have to, I have to turn my life around. I have to stop doing these things to myself. I have to keep moving forward and keep kind of keeping my eye on the prize, which is a better life and breaking away from this. Like my thing is it's not so much about I'm not trying to be like wish like, oh, I had hope and I wanted to live for like a great life. It but it was more about like finding a meaning in my life. And even though some people might say this is not the best way to look at it, but I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them that like I wasn't gonna be their victim.
I don't know why that's a bad way to look at it if that's what motivated you and that's
Yeah.
what gave you strength.
Like, I didn't wanna be their victim. I didn't want them to, like, look at me and be like, "Look how" excuse my language, "Look how fucked up she is. Look how fucked up her life is." Like, clearly, in the back of my head, like, my thing was is, like, as long if I keep doing great things or if I keep living a good life, that just shows that I'm not fucked up, and I'm not a liar, and I'm not a bad person. And now I know, like, I'm not a bad person because I love myself. Like, I've stopped trying to prove to them that I'm not a bad person. I do it for myself. But it was kind of that motivating factor for me to, like, just prove them wrong. Like, I'm not gonna be a I'm not gonna let you bring me down. I'm not gonna let you ruin my life. And I certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way. And, like, even though I had gotten to a point where I thought that I was quote unquote healed, which I've learned, like, my version of like what I thought was my version of healing is really not what healing is. And I still like made some pretty big mistakes along the way, which I know we'll talk about. I still did a really good I lived a good life. Like, I did good things, and I worked on stuff, and, I showed them that I've created a great life, and I created a great life for my kids too.
And you got two really amazing kids.
Yeah.
What was the first step you took towards rebuilding?
I left the area. Like, that was the first step I took because I had to get out of that area because it's such a small place, the Shenandoah Valley. I mean, and our family's so, I've got so many cousins and everything else, and I didn't wanna be at the local grocery store in my town and have to run into a brother. So the first thing I did was I left. I finished my grad school, I moved to DC, and I kinda started over, and I didn't even know I had no clue what I was gonna do. I had no clue, like, where I was gonna go. nothing, but I decided I'm moving, and I moved to DC and kind of just got a fresh start. And I've been here now for Catherine's 22, so I've been here for 24 years.
Did you have to let go of anything, any beliefs, people, or expectations to be able to move forward and to really make that radical change of moving?
Well, yeah, I had to literally take a leap of faith. I came here without a job. I quit a job that I had back in the valley that was secure, and it was part of my major, and I would have been able to be there for who knows how long, and I was actually doing really well at it. And I just literally jumped headfirst into the frying pan, so to speak. Came down here without a job. I had my 2 dogs, of course, because I've had
Oh, yeah,
animals since
sure.
I have animals since I was a freshman in college. So the 2 dogs and I just packed up the car. We had found a place to live through like a crazy, that's another side story, but packed up the car, moved here, and took off.
What surprised you the most about yourself in the process?
That I will always land on my feet and I'll always figure it out. And I think that's the thing that I've learned about myself, is that no matter how tough things seem to get, I'll always, always, always figure it out, and I'll be okay. And I think I told you that I actually have this. I'm not a religious person at all. Like, I'm not, but there is a Bible verse from Psalms that says, "She's clothed in strength and dignity and laughs without fear of the future." And I have that tattooed on my back.
I love that. You also said that you made some mistakes along the way, that you thought your first version of healed was healed, and then so there's another turning point, where you realized, you know what, maybe I'm not as healed as I thought I was. What was that turning point?
That was when I met my second husband. um, and I literally, it was interesting because I feel like I was attracted to him like a magnet. And everything was like this fast moving, beautiful romance where now I realize what it's called. It's love bombing. And, everything was moved super fast, and we fell in love. We moved in right away. We got married. I thought I had this perfect, perfect, perfect person who loved me more than anything in the world. But what I realized shortly into it was that I basically had married my father all over again, because he was hiding lots of secrets. One of them being that he was an addict, the other one being that he was an abuser. And I had to get out of it.
How long did the second marriage last?
The relationship lasted probably 5 years. The marriage itself only lasted a year, a little
Okay.
over a year.
And did you have kids at that time?
I did. I had my 2 kids.
And how
So,
old were they?
uh, middle school, Catherine was probably 12 when it ended, 12 or 13 when it ended. And then Connor was in elementary school, so he would have been not 9, because they're 3.5 years apart,
Okay.
8 or 9, and then 12 and 13.
And what made you realize that you were in a place you didn't want to be?
Well, initially, when things started going south, I found myself kind of reverting back to, excuse me, old habits of, when y- y- you are, in a way, you're taught things, right, by abusers. And so I was taught to keep secrets, and I was taught to hide things, and I was taught to have shame, and you know, and so when everything first started going south, all of a sudden I kind of fell back into those old patterns, because one, I was embarrassed, because here I had gone into a second marriage, and it was supposed to be this perfect marriage, and this person was supposed to be great. And in my head, I was like, oh shit, I fucked up again. Right. So I was hiding things, and I was ashamed. So
What were you
that
hiding?
shame, I was hiding what was going on with him and his abuse and the addiction and everything else. Um, and there was also the shame that, shame is one of the worst feelings anybody can ever have. And as people, that is the biggest, I would say that's the biggest emotion that someone who has been sexually abused that's one of the biggest emotions they have, right? Is that shame. And that shame came flooding back. And that was one of the feelings I felt. And so for a while, I kept thinking, between the shame and then the embarrassment of I fell back into these old patterns. I worked so hard to make myself better. I worked so hard to break away from this past and make myself be this quote unquote perfect person. And now here I am in this bad situation again. So initially I thought, I got to fix it. Like, what can I do to fix it and hide it? Right. So it's like you're digging a hole and you're just digging yourself deeper and deeper, and you're trying to fix it and hide it at the same time. And like, it's not working because guess what? You can't fix other people. And that's one of the things I learned. You can only fix yourself.
So, what was the breaking point? When did it all come apart?
The breaking point was when he had told me, I suspected that he was using again. And he had told me he wasn't, and he told me he was good. And I had ultimately kind of laid down the line, so to speak, and said, if I find out that you're using, I'm out. But who knows if I would have actually done it, if it wouldn't have been for my daughter. And what happened was one evening he came home from what was supposed to be a meeting with his psychiatrist, and we were eating dinner, and he started passing out in front of us, like in the plate of fajitas. It's actually funny that I still remember what I cooked. I had made fajitas that night. And I immediately knew something was off. So I got up and I had gone out to his car, opened his car, and found a bottle of Ativan and vodka. And so clearly, like, the writing's on the wall. And I came back up to our place, and of course, I started getting upset and saying, I know you're using. I found this in your car. Like, he's denying it. And I'm like, you need to go get help. You need to go to rehab. And the breaking point was that my daughter all of a sudden started crying, and she got down on her knees in front of him and put her hands in his lap and said, please stop doing this. Please go get help. Because if you don't go get help, my mommy will leave you and you'll have no one to take care of you and you'll die. And it was that aha moment, that light bulb, right? So I sat and I watched this little girl, because our kids, we can tell our kids to do things all day long, but they are only going to do what they see us do.
Yep.
And my little girl was seeing me repeat my family patterns. And the realization is that she was going to go repeat those patterns one day. She was going to marry somebody like him, maybe marry someone like my father, because trauma is passed down, even though we don't want to, even if we don't abuse our children, our behavior passes that trauma down. And it was that aha moment where I was like, there is, under no circumstances will my daughter ever beg in a man's feet. I hope. It's not going to be because of me. So that was it. And I don't want my son to do that either. And he was there, but it was, I'm not trying to throw him and say that he didn't have feelings as well, because he went through his trauma. But she's the one who felt that she had this ability to change this person, or we had this ability to change this person. So I was out. I was out. I, I left that moment and didn't go back. Never went back. And he put us through 7 years of, at least 7 years, I think, of pure hell. Stalking us, multiple restraining orders, almost killed us. Like, it's like, that's another whole, I could write a book on that. terrible, terrible situation, but I never ever once waffled on the decision that we were not going back. That was it. Because my thing is I would rather my legacy be to my daughter that I took care, like I did the right thing. A guy protected us, right? And I did the right thing, than for her to ever look and say, like, you chose that person over us, or this is how I have to treat other people. If something isn't healthy for you and something isn't good, you get the fuck out. End of story.
So after you did that and after you left, which for anybody out there experiencing domestic violence, one of the things that I want to say here, someone who practices in this, is it doesn't discriminate based on race, ethnicity,
Mm-mm.
socioeconomic status. And, I'm sitting here with you. You are a successful business owner. You are a beautiful woman. And, you know, I know so many people who would look at you and be like, that can't be you.
And it's funny because like so lots of my clients don't even know my story. They don't know what I went through. And some of them I was training during the time. And I just never, because I didn't share it, I didn't want to. I just didn't, you don't, there's some of them that you kept that line. I didn't want to talk about it or whatever. But yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't matter who you are or what color you are or what wealth status you are. It's gonna, it doesn't discriminate.
So you said earlier in this episode that you thought you were healed and that this experience, taught you that you weren't and that you needed to keep healing. What was the difference? What did you think was healed versus what you think now or think after that situation?
I think now the thing is that in the before that situation happened, I realized that I was looking to replace a family. I was looking for other people to love me, right? And to accept me. And the realization was that in that moment and during that whole process, I had to learn to love myself. And that's where I had to go back into the therapy and realize that, like, one, like for me, I always thought healing was this thing where it was like, it, once you're quote unquote healed, it's like it's gone, right? It doesn't exist anymore. You don't think about it anymore. You don't, but that's not what it was. And I had to learn how to blend that into me and maybe make it a scar versus completely getting rid of it. So it doesn't mean that, like, when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about the fact that I was a child of sexual abuse until I was 15, 16 years old. But doesn't, it doesn't make me seek out. I'm not looking for people to take it away. So I think that's the difference, is that I was looking for someone else to take that away from me, right? It doesn't define who I am,
Hmm.
but it makes me who I am. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. In fact, I heard it described this way, actually by my therapist, about trauma or anxiety being an unwelcome guest. That if you put so much effort into shoving the guest out of the house and like kicking it out, you can't stay.
Which is what I was
You're
doing.
actually putting so much effort on it. But if you just invite it like the, great Uncle Bob that nobody particularly loves having around. Sorry if there's anyone out there with the name Bob, but like great Uncle Bob that no one particularly loves having around, but you just sit him in a corner and leave him alone. You actually can focus more on everybody else at the dinner table and all the other good things
Right.
instead
And
of
so
focusing
that's
on
what
the
I was
shoulder and
doing.
pushing something away.
I was looking for someone else to love me and like take it away. And I was trying to shove it out the door. Whereas now it's exactly what you're saying. It lives in my head. Every day I know that it's there. And there are days where, I might see a color. Maybe I smell something. Maybe there's days where I have dreams, right? I have bad dreams or whatever. Maybe I see something on TV, but it's part of this world, but it's not who I am. And if I have to take a moment to be sad about it, or when I see some story on TV about somebody that was sexually abused or whatever, it triggers something in me and I take a minute and own it and mourn it, that's great. But I am who I am because of me, not because of somebody else. They're not going to create my identity. They're not going to make, they're not going to make me lovable. I am. Like I am. And I finally have gotten to a point in my life where, and I'm not perfect, and I know that, and I know that I still have trauma responses. Like I had one today with my husband, as a matter of fact. But like I really like myself. And I know that I'm a good person. And I know those people that did those things to me, they've got they're not it is but like there's a place for them somewhere and they're gonna pay their price. But I did everything I could to get myself safe and make myself a good person. And now I'm doing everything I can to hopefully help other people out there. Because I think the thing is that if there was some as a little girl, a 12-year-old girl, just like Maya Angelou, right? If there's some like young woman that's in her 20s who went through the same thing I did, that here's the story and I help her, that is the most amazing thing.
So, the purpose of this podcast is to reach those people that are in that moment, whether it's they're going through a divorce or a business collapse or coming to terms with something awful that happened to them, like you did. And it's to help to remind them that this moment is not the end and that there is a rebuild on the other side. So, if you wanted to talk to that person who is experiencing what you went through, either as a child sex abuse victim or as a domestic violence victim as an adult, first, what would you say to them to help them know that this is not the end?
If they're worth it, they're worth it. So it's kind of funny that I always think about that saying because that was one of the things that my, abusive husband, like when we first got married, he had that engraved on our wedding bands, like, you're worth it, because it was the thing that he used as like not to use drugs, whatever. But I actually take it now and I think about that, right? And that's like, I am worth it. Like, I am worth it. And so are those people out there. Nobody in this world deserves to be treated poorly. No one deserves to be abused in any way, shape, or form. And if there is someone out there, I understand sometimes as spouses and stuff, we might get in a fight and we might say mean words to one another, like shut up or leave me alone or whatever. But if you're in an abusive relationship, that is a constant thing. I mean, abuse shouldn't even happen once if you're in a relationship, end of story. But like you as a person, you're worth being treated well. And if people in your life are not treating you well, get rid of them. Get rid of You don't deserve it. You're worth it. You're worth it.
What practical steps or habits helped you start again?
I think for me, the thing is that I just kept moving. I don't know how to quite put those into words. One, like I said, I read a lot. So I read a lot, a lot. I talked a lot to my support system. I did a lot of therapy and I just put my head down and just kept moving forward. I made little goals. So it wasn't
Like what? Like what kind of little goals?
so when I left my husband, my spouse, like the abuser, I was making $1,000 a month. That's it. And I had 2 kids that pretty much lived with me full time. Basically every week I made a goal to get at least, $50 more. How do I get $50 more? And so I just kept building that business. And I didn't look at I learned that if I look really far into the future at the big goal, that's going to crush me. So I just started making my little goals. And so it was $50 a week. And then it was, okay, now we're in a 1-bedroom apartment. Let's move to a 2-bedroom apartment. Like it was just the little things that I kept moving forward with. Um, Made sure that I stayed in therapy. That was the biggest thing. And I used to call it every time I would get so tired of when you're dealing with someone that is domestic assault or when you're in domestic abuse, you have to not let pressure off of the abuser. So there were times where I would be really, really tired because I'm sure like you can speak for this. When you're in the system doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for for the victim, right? And I remember always being so tired because he would violate the restraining order or he would, whatever it was. And because everything was a process. But I just kept thinking, like, I can't let my foot off the gas. Right. So I mean, every time he violated that restraining order, I don't give a shit if it was a text message that just said hi. I was right back down at that sheriff's office filling out those papers to say that he violated that restraining order. Um, and that's the biggest thing is like if you're caught in a domestic abuse system, like don't let your foot off the gas if you're trying to get out of it because they are going to try to tire you out and the system is going to tire you out. But you cannot let your foot off the gas.
So if someone was in the middle of their own collapse like this, what's one strategy you tell them to start with?
To keep your support system close. Like have a very like I don't care if it's just one person, have somebody that you can just tell everything to and you know rely on and have someone that can be there to like keep you motivated. Don't lose the motivation. Does that make sense?
It
That
does.
sound
It does. And that a lot of that starts with being honest, which means letting go of the shame.
right. Well, that's the big absolutely. That's the biggest
So
thing.
hard.
Don't be like find one person out there. And that's I guess what I'm saying is like find one person if you have that person in your support system that you can be completely and totally honest with about what's going on and that they're not going to make you feel shame and that you don't have to feel shame. And sometimes I think that maybe it's somebody outside of your friend circle, right? So like I remember for me, one of the biggest things that helped me was that finally like it took 3 years, but 3 years into this, I was appointed an advocate for I think it was House of Roof. Does that sound
Yes.
so I was appointed an advocate from House of Roof, and that helped me so much. So if you have to go out and find someone that's, like, outside of your friend circle that can be there that you can tell all this stuff to, because there is nothing that those people have heard that's gonna shock them, go do it, and they'll help you find, like, whether you need childcare or whatever it is you need to get through the system.
What role did failure play in your comeback?
Uh Well, a lot because I failed a lot. Like, I mean, that's the thing is
But
that
that's the thing. Everybody thinks it's a linear path. So
it's not linear. It's not linear at all. I mean, that's my whole life. My whole life has been this. I mean, when you are a victim of, which is what I was saying, you're a victim of that kind of childhood. You're you're never like totally quote unquote okay. So you're going to have a complete linear path. So whether that was you're in college and you're almost failing out and you're, you know, drinking too much and you're cutting yourself or whatever it is, and then you have to pick yourself back up again because you feel like you might have hit a wall. It's just you have to get your head down. Even if you slide back, you have to get your head down and just keep moving forward. Kind of, I think about the movie that my kids loved, um, Finding Nemo. Remember Finding Nemo?
I do.
And remember how I think about this all the time. The whole thing was what did the little fish always used to say? Just keep swimming, right? Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And I think about that all the time because life is hard. I tell my kids this. It is probably 80% hard, 20% good. So you take the 20% good that happens in your life, the good things, whether it's, getting a new puppy, like if that's good, whatever it is, you take that and you embrace it and you hang on to it and just know that like you got to keep swimming through that hard shit. Like you just have to keep swimming through it.
So I couldn't agree with all of that more. But the main reason I want to just come back to it, the failure part, one of the things I like to say in my practice and to the attorneys that I work with and legal assistants and paralegals is there's no such thing as a perfect victim. Like it just doesn't exist. And I have met so many men and women and children who have been through different kinds of abuse who feel like they don't deserve help or they don't deserve to succeed because they lashed back one time or they physically fought back one time or they sent some nasty emails or
Mhm.
at
I
one
did
point
those
they
things.
they did these things and therefore they're just as bad or they don't deserve it. And I will tell you, sometimes even society will say that. But what role did that play for you? Because you said
And
that
I did
piece
all
is
those
a failure
things.
too.
What's that?
I said that piece is a quote failure too because people,
But it's not.
but
That's the thing though. It's
yes,
not
it's not. That's why I said quote failure too. And I
because
want people to
those
hear
are
that. Like, you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to have behaved perfectly
Mhm.
to be worth not being treated that way.
I did all those things. I sent a nasty email. I called him. At one point he went to rehab multiple times. I felt bad. I met him for coffee. I met him for coffee to see how he was doing because I wanted him to do well, right? And I did all those things. I engaged multiple times. I have emails where I emailed him back. I have text messages where I messaged him back and said, terrible things to him right back or whatever because they break you. I could honestly say that even as with the situation with my father, I love my dad. I loved my dad. He is my dad. Like I have good memories of my father. Even my mother, who, I feel like I always say this and I can't understand this myself as a mother, but literally my mother chose to feed me to the wolves to save her own self because she chose to lie. I know she knew. I know it because I have memories that she found, she caught him one time, but like she chose to live a lie and deny the truth so that she could stay in that marriage and save face, whatever it was. Maybe it was the fear of accepting the truth was too much for her, but I still loved her, right? And I have fond memories. And there were things I remember when I grappled with telling on my dad that I really had those thoughts that you're saying. Well, we did used to go Christmas shopping together, just he and I, when I was even in college, right? So there were things that we did. I moved back home once for a year after graduating, like between semesters. Like all those things I struggled with because it was like people used to call me. I was the only daughter in the family, and people used to call me daddy's little angel, right? Because daddy loved his little girl. And we did have this relationship that was also good. So I grappled with those things as the victim of his abuse. Like, I don't want to tell on him because I don't want to get him in trouble.
I cannot tell you and endorse like how completely normal that is because there is no like in the same way as there's no such thing as a perfect victim. I have yet to meet the person. So excuse me. I have yet to meet the person that is 100% pure evil.
Right. And I think if someone would have said to me, look, when I was in middle school, my father, like I said, my father was accused by a cousin and I was pulled out of school in middle school by social workers, brought into the principal's office and questioned, right? And criminal charge he was being investigated criminally. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute him, so everything was dropped. But do you understand that I actually was protective of him, right? And I felt bad because I didn't want to get him. I mean, even after all of that happened, I mean, of course, this is all brainwashing and this is what they do to you. Looking back, I don't feel bad about that because that's what he did to me. And I was a child. So I was protective of my family. But even when I was older, it was about like I felt bad. I didn't want to get him in trouble. I didn't want to get him in trouble. And when I was in my 30s, I called protective service. I called Shenandoah County Social Services. I hope somebody in Shenandoah County is listening to this because in my 30s, I called Shenandoah County Social Services and reported him. And initially, I felt bad about it because I didn't want to get my dad and my mom in trouble. And Shenandoah County Social Services said to me they couldn't do anything about it because it was no longer happening to me. I said, I'm in my 30s. I have two kids. I don't live there anymore. They said, well, unfortunately, we can't do anything about it. But when I did that, I felt bad because I was like, I'm going to get my dad in trouble. What if he goes to jail for this? What if my mom gets in trouble? But I knew it was the right thing to do.
So, what's the best advice you'd give to someone who's lying awake at 2 a.m. thinking that this happened to them, whether it's sexual abuse or physical abuse or financial or emotional, and they're thinking that their whole life is over?
It's not over. It's not over. And it's going to be really, you're going to have a lot of backslides and you're going to have a lot of emotions, but it's not over. And you can do the right thing. And, there's nobody out there that deserves to be assaulted, abused, whether it's emotionally, physically, sexually, I don't care what it is. No one deserves that. And love yourself enough. And I know that that is really hard when you are in it. It is really, really hard to do, but love yourself enough to stand up, rise above it, and get out of it. And know that it's going to be hard. It's not like you're going to make a decision that's like, oh, I'm going to change this and I'm going to get out of it. Like, because that's not how it works. It's going to be really, really hard, but don't give up. Don't give up.
So, we ask this of every guest on the show. I'm going to start a sentence and I want you to finish it for me.
Oh, God. I'm so bad with this. I'm so bad with like impulsive things like that.
This is not the end, it's the beginning of blank.
This is not the end. If we're going to talk to, if I'm trying to reach people out there who are being abused, this is not the end. It's the beginning of one of the hardest parts of your life. But if you get through it, and you will, because you're a strong person and you're a survivor, the other side is going to be amazing. You're going to still have bumps in the roads and you're still going to have like issues probably because we're never ever fully rid of our trauma. But get through the hard shit. Don't give up. Keep swimming. Because when you get to the other side, it's going to be a good life and you're worth it.
Thank you so much for coming back and doing this. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. And of course, I'm going to link in case anyone wants to buy one of your amazing candles or work with you. I'll make sure that they can find you. But Angela, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this.
You're welcome.
I know that I learned a lot from you.
Thank you.